The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Any health advice given, whether general, diet, physical or spiritual, is general only and must be verified by your doctor. If you need medical advice, please consult a doctor.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum to all our listeners and viewers. I welcome you all to another exciting and educating edition of the Health and Fitness Show. I'm your host Fahad Matin for today's show, and I hope and pray that all of us are fit and healthy by the grace of Almighty Allah. I do pray that you all have a nice and positive week so far and looking forward for a nice and relaxing weekend. This program is broadcasting live from the studios of Inspire FM. It's broadcasting live today on 10th of October 2019, which is 10-10-19. And casting its positive vibes to all our lovely people in Luton and all the surrounding areas of Luton like Dunstable, Harpenden, Bedford, going all the way to Stevenage and all the surrounding areas from left, right, centre, top and bottom. Our positive airway is also reaching to our listeners who are listening us through Inspire FM app or website. Or you can view us via our Facebook live link. All you have to do is just go to Inspire FM Facebook page and click live link. If you're listening to this show on Sunday or any other Thursday, that means it is repeat. So, hey ho, but today is not the day because today is 10th of the 10th, 2019. As we all know, we cover a different health-related topic every single week. So sometimes we covered a very unique topics like the one which we are doing today. And these topics are something which we normally try to raise awareness because these are the topics which we do not listen or hear about it on a day-to-day basis. And then you came to know about these kind of things when a very loved one or dear one do get infected in any way, shape or form. So hence, it is very, very important to raise awareness of these problems or syndromes, or we can say which affects our life, daily life sometimes. So, moving on from that, the topic for today we are discussing is to creating awareness of Rett syndrome. Yes, you have heard me correctly. We are talking about Rett syndrome, and I'm not the person who will be talking about it because I have no idea. Until beginning of this week, I never know that this syndrome arrived. And yes, indeed, I work in NHS. I work in NHS since last 10 years, and I have never heard of it. So when this call came to me, I was very intrigued, and I said, well, this is something which I really love to share with our listeners. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest for tonight. He is Robert Adamek. And he is from Rett UK. Good evening, and good evening, Doc.
Good evening.
How are you, mate?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having us here.
So, Rob, sorry, how do you pronounce your surname?
Adamek, yeah.
Adamek.
Yeah.
I remember you before you show, you saying, and I called you from the wrong name as well. So, why don't you give us a quick introduction about yourself and about the company, Rett UK, and then we will go in depth in the topic itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Rob. I work for Rett UK, and essentially I'm the deputy CEO. We are a national charity, so we look after the whole of the UK. We also obviously, I'll explain it more detail in a bit, but we feed all of our information, all our findings, essentially our research, back into the community and then back to Europe and then back worldwide. So obviously we work in partnership with all the organisations we can across the world. Rett syndrome is it's a complex neurological disorder, and it's normally diagnosed early on in childhood. It mainly affects girls. There's a very, very small percentage of boys that are affected by it. Unfortunately, with boys that do suffer from Rett syndrome, the symptoms can be quite severe, extremely severe, and in most cases, a baby won't come to term when it's the boys. So it does affect 1 in 12,000 girls, and this is across the world. So because it's a genetic, caused by genetic abnormality, it affects everybody across the world the same way. It's not a lifestyle issue. It's not who you have a child with. It's all based on genetics.
And we will and we will discuss about it further on in the show. But I'd like to know about yourself. How did you become involved in this company?
Yeah, absolutely. So my previous career, so I started my career at Chamber of Commerce, and then I went on to work for World Trade Center, and I thought I'd start off business by myself. So I started pitching for work, and I got work with a local charity in Luton that does some great work, Noah Enterprise. And for the past 7 years I worked for them and wanted to move on to stay in the kind of charity sector because it's something I really liked. And this position popped up, and I have So what happened is I went on LinkedIn, as we all do. When you're looking for a job, sometimes you polish up your CV, and I saw the advert. And in the advert, like you, I'd never heard of Rett syndrome before. And the advert opens with it's the second biggest cause for females for severe disability. So only behind Down syndrome. So it's. At that point, I thought the same as you. Surely I should know about this. There's started reading a little bit more, and I thought perhaps I could get involved. Something struck a chord because I have a daughter that's a year and a half, and as I read the literature, it was kind of quickly clear to see that it is girls that age that are normally you start to see the developmental regression. So the things that you and I all take for granted. So everybody out there that's got children will understand. Roughly about a year they start to do certain things, and then about a year and a half they start to do certain things. They say certain words and maybe start constructing sentences more. And you've taught them basic maybe colours, shapes, or sounds of animals, and those things start to regress. And perhaps in most cases, the little children they start to become a bit floppy is the best word to explain it. Their muscles are a bit weaker. They're not standing and supporting themselves. And as this regression continues, every parent then has a different path which they follow. Most go to obviously the doctors. They go backwards and forwards. They are multiple misdiagnoses. I mean, it's very rare to get the perfect diagnosis the first time. And we go back to what you said originally. You work in the NHS. You're around these things because it's a rare thing. Not everybody knows about it, and the symptoms when they present themselves at the beginning are very similar to a lot of other things. So, for instance, the girls that have fits, straight away a lot of people jump to epilepsy. There is natural regression in some children anyway. Children's brains, when they're overloaded, sometimes they do start to forget the colours, but they're learning other things. And a lot of doctors kind of say, wait, and then you wait a year, or you wait 2, or you're told that your child has autism, somewhere on the autism spectrum. And if I just make it clear from the beginning, Rett syndrome is not part of the autism spectrum at all. It is its own condition. But yes, massive misdiagnosis, and then finally somebody somehow gets the diagnosis. Often it's a very difficult diagnosis because the first thing that they tell you not to do, and this is words from our families, we speak to thousands of families, first thing they tell you not to do is go home and Google it. Now, just today we were talking about how sensitive that is. If I was a father, the first thing I would do was ignore that advice and go and Google it. And so you Google it, and there's three things that come up: our website, the website of the other organisation that does the research around Rett syndrome, and Wikipedia. If you see the first picture on Wikipedia, it's the most extreme case of scoliosis, which is a condition that affects, sorry, I'm talking to you users, you'll obviously know what scoliosis. It's a condition that affects your spine and it starts to bend. And in this day and age, as soon as that happens, there are support systems, there's operations, there's things that can be done. And I mean, in the picture, it's absolutely awful. So you've just got this diagnosis, perhaps your daughter's only just starting to regress. And not only are you reading these terrible things, that she'll probably end up in a wheelchair, won't be able to speak, won't be able to, you'll see these pictures. So this is constant fight. I mean, we said before about going off on a tangent, but it's something we literally discussed this morning. We're trying our hardest to have that picture changed on Wikipedia because it doesn't accurately represent the girls. And I mean, unfortunately, it was only up until it was about 7 years ago that there was finally a bigger consensus that there is more to our girls, to our girls and boys, to our Rett sufferers than complete regression, because for a while people had just given up on these girls.
Because when you hear the name Rett, and the reason I pronounce it Rett, because at least it will change the whole. Because when you hear the name Rett, it's a bit kind of hard to understand what it is and how it is. So what Rett stands for, basically. As with all of these things, like with the planets and like with certain discoveries, it's the person that discover it, second name that gets to name it. So just whilst Rett might be difficult, the original professor that discovered the condition, the very specific genetic mutation, and since then obviously they've discovered other mutations. So I won't go into a super amount of detail because that is extremely scientific, and in some of it, I've got to be honest with you, is even well above my head, and given time I'm hoping to understand that. But we've got cutting edge research on the various genetic abnormalities that happen and which proteins etc affect and cause this. So yeah. Okay, cool. We will discuss a bit more about this. So let me introduce our listeners into the mix. Listeners, if you like to know more about this topic or want to have a burning question about this topic, please do give us a call on 01582 481822. I'll repeat, 01582 481822. Or you can send your questions via text messages or WhatsApp on 07779 481822. I repeat, 07779 481822. We are talking about Rett syndrome today, and it is nothing to do with Rett. It is about a specific genetic disorder which happens to find out in girls of young ages, as we all know now. So let's ask Rob a bit more about it. So Rob, as you have said, and I'd just like you to quickly recap about the Rett syndrome, as in who does get affected from this syndrome, and how does it get affected?
So like we said in the opening, it is mainly girls. The boys, most of them won't come to term, and because of the way it affecting. So if I read the actual scientific thing to make sure I don't misinterpret it, so Rett syndrome is caused by a specific genetic mutation which is usually brought to the child in either the sperm or the egg, and therefore it's present at the time of conception. So this goes back to me saying that it's not a lifestyle choice, it's not your health, it's either there or it isn't. Now, for instance, when it's diagnosed, and you're talking to the families, so I was at a clinic in Manchester, and the clinics are held all over the UK, and they are specialist clinics for people that suffer from Rett syndrome, as there are clinics that specialise in all kinds of things. The family that I met there, they were really keen on having another child, but they had held off for 5 years, and they'd held off because of bad information. Once again, they had read something online, and unfortunately when they had their diagnosis 9 years ago, they had it in a substandard way. It wouldn't be how you would want the news delivered, and they were told to basically give up on their daughter, that she wouldn't even be here at this time anymore, and if she was, she would be, for want of a better word, this is the direct word they used, they said that she'd be a vegetable. So this family they were devastated. I mean, the chap that was there, his wife could struggle to speak English as well. So not only had it been told in such a horrible way, it had been told a week before her wedding. So all the way through her wedding, her family, they were all crying. So it
was before the birth of the child. Or is it after the birth of the child?
They were to have that they had Rett syndrome. This was after the birth of the child.
Okay.
So obviously she really wants to know whether she can have another child. Now, rather than go into the super detailed analysis, but the easy suggestion for us was that she just has a genetic test. If she has a genetic test, you'll know then if the certain defects are there and what then the chances are. So if the defect isn't present, you have exactly the same chance again. So we went back to about 1 in 12,000. There's all kinds of figures banded about, but our research and the research in the UK suggests it's 1 in 12,000, and that's across the globe.
Okay, so you just you just literally clarify of my second part, which I was about to ask you, that how many people do ratio-wise get affected, but in terms of people who are diagnosed so far, how many people do you think have diagnosed so far?
So we think in the UK, so this is all based on, unfortunately this is based on a lot of think, because as I was explaining, there's an awful lot of misdiagnosis. If you think that up to maybe sometimes 5-10 years old, they're not even being diagnosed as Rett syndrome. So we don't have everybody, but on our, essentially what you would say on our books registered with us is over 1,000. We believe in the UK there's over 2,500 sufferers. There could be more, there could be slightly less. That's about the figure that the professionals seem to all agree on. But what that suggests is that if you take that and extrapolate it mathematically, in Luton alone, you would have about 9 families that had a daughter or son with Rett syndrome. We know of 2. So what we're saying is that there's another 7 families out there not getting the support or the advice that they need. When I go on to explain just how this affects girls, you can understand that there will be families out there that haven't even been told what their daughter's suffering from. So they may think this is severe autism and they may be treating it as such. With Rett syndrome, there are very specialist things. So we have a family helpline, and we have hundreds and hundreds of calls every year, and you can imagine that the ladies that answer that helpline, whilst they may not be medical professionals or surgeons or doctors, what they do have is an intrinsic kind of knowledge that's drilled into them. So when the mother phones back and says, do you know what, you suggested this kind of gastric something for the intestines to help with the bloating, or you suggested this doctor because of the scoliosis and the curvature of the spine or the sleeping conditions, after a while, you get to see which things start to work. And then we can offer the best support and advice. So currently, the best advice that these families will be getting will probably be quite hit and miss, because what the doctor or whoever it is, the GP or whoever it might be giving them the advice, will be looking at a textbook and that symptom. So, for instance, treating the epilepsy fits, you will follow the typical pattern of epilepsy and use the standard procedure. It's sometimes, in our case, there are things that you've got to consider or things that would help. So a lot of our girls are on thickeners to hold down their food and to help them put on weight. If you're not told that and your daughter's constantly getting sick, but they're not suggesting these things, they're just saying, well, maybe she's lactose intolerant or change her diet or you're searching around for this. This is a very easy answer. So a lot of our work is going out there and trying to talk to people, engage with people. And at the moment, October is across the world is kind of Rett Awareness Month. I know there's always an awareness month for all kinds of causes, but I mean, it works hand in hand. I mean, I'll show you the direct. There are people out there that don't know this, that can't access the support, and everything we do for the families is free. At every point. So everything I discuss, from the advice line to the events that we put on to the very specialist communication devices and training that we have access to our families for, which I will go into a little bit more detail, all of that is free. So we just, it's sad to know or to think that there's families out there not being able to access that advice.
Okay, how do it get diagnosed? That if it is so rare, and sometimes people don't, sometimes do get misdiagnosed and so forth, and the symptoms sometimes do mimic other illnesses.
Very closely.
How does it get diagnosed? Is it a blood test or is it something else?
So the bottom line to absolutely guarantee would be a blood test, and a genetic-based blood test to find the specific mutation, which is called MCP2. MEP2 is the specific mutation, but there would be that. But there are criteria. So on our website, or I would suggest going to our website. We fact check absolutely everything we've written. There's arguments that some places have put some misinformation out. The diagnosis, you would normally have to, unfortunately, pick up the symptoms yourself. As a mother or a father, if you're being told your daughter has autism, but all of a sudden you're reading the stuff about autism and you're thinking there's more to this. We know this firsthand. There's a lady in our office that her daughter was diagnosed with autism, but for 4 years she fought and said there's more to this. This isn't what my daughter. And you as a parent have always a good feeling. Sorry, not the microphone. You as a parent have that inner instinct. I'm not saying every time that we're right. I'm a parent too. Sometimes we worry unnecessarily, but if you know in this serious case and your daughter is regressing, then you can have to keep pushing. Unfortunately, as we probably both know and that everybody knows, the NHS struggles for money, so you do have to push for these things if you really believe it, but it's very difficult to believe that there would be there's so many signs that it's very difficult to believe that we wouldn't end up there at some point. It's just we obviously wish people would end up there faster.
Okay. As you said that, so in terms of diagnosis, there's a test, there's a specific genetic marker test, which we normally get it done. So once it's been diagnosed, are there different stages, or is there any way working of
absolutely.
how severe? Because that's how most of the symptoms work, or
Absolutely.
any of the like if you've been diagnosed with X, Y, and Z disease, you normally find out, or if you have a syndrome.
You're 100% right, and it does work like that. So I go back to people understand spectrums very well with autism. So you can be low on the spectrum where you have mild autistic traits, or you can be the very high end where you have severe difficulty, and then even at the high end it can manifest itself. I mean, people like to fantasize and think of Rain Man, or somebody that can literally, you throw a load of numbers at them and they can count really fast, but those are the extreme slices. Same as in our community with our Rett sufferers. You can have anybody from as we were saying, from birth that they have Rett syndrome, but you can have anyone from the lower end of the symptoms. So they have mild breathing difficulty, they have lost their speech, but they're still able to walk, to the full end. So the easiest way to explain it is we have currently a set of twins, the exact same genetic mutation, manifests itself completely differently in both girls. Because it affects certain parts of the genes, it will then affect certain parts of the brain, which then affects certain parts of perhaps movement. So there's something called atypical syndromes, which is what's normally attached with the illness or syndrome. So it's the things that you look out for that can tell you that this person possibly has Rett syndrome. So what we know in our thing is everything from hand wringing, so that's very common with our girls, where they're rubbing their hands backwards and forwards, and they start to lose the ability to grasp at things, to bad sleep, like I keep mentioning scoliosis, abnormal muscle term, and kind of growth retardation, so just absolute slowing down of growth. For instance, you're not seeing the growth that you'd normally expect. Perhaps you've already had a child and you're thinking, well, my first child walked earlier. No, we're not talking about a week or two, we're talking years. Your child gets to 3 and they're struggling to walk. All of these things. A lot of what I'm saying, though, is it's not black and white. It's a lot requires you as a parent to kind of be switched on, and also to try and figure out that there's something more. Unfortunately, a lot of our girls do end up in wheelchairs. They end up with severe breathing problems, obviously with scoliosis and bending of the spine. If you're in a wheelchair too, it's very difficult, and the incredible frustration of being essentially a girl, lady, or young boy or an older guy trapped inside a wheelchair, not being able to communicate. So that was the biggest thing. So there's still a brain working in there, and in some cases, yes, so the skull doesn't grow and the brain doesn't carry on forming, but as it would normally form. But we have some communication experts, especially on our team that are some of the best in Europe. And what they found is actually sometimes the competency of our sufferers is higher than the average. So when they're measured, we've got girls using communication devices going to university, and we're not saying that everybody is able to do this, but like it goes from one side to the other. And now what we're trying to do is encourage people not to give up, because they've been told from the beginning to give up. And it's just, we'll help you get through the day, we'll stop this symptom, stop that symptom, but helping the girls actually live a life and have a family live a life. And can you imagine how important it is for your daughter to turn around or your son be able to turn around and literally, they won't say it with their mouth, but they type a button that says I love you. I mean, there's people,
it is priceless. And on that note, I must say, wow, the time has passed really, really quickly.
That's because I can talk.
Well, I do not know, but it is very interesting, and we definitely like to know a bit more about it. And there are things like what age people normally get diagnosed from, what is the effects, is this dangerous, and is there any prevention, what are the cures? There's a spectrum of things which I really, my brains are firing all these questions which I will be asking you, and we will be asking you when we come back after this very short break. So guys, don't go anywhere. We will be right back after these very quick azan and short break.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Any health advice given, whether general, diet, physical or spiritual, is general only and must be verified by your doctor. If you need medical advice, please consult a doctor.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening to all our listeners and viewers. Welcome back to Health and Fitness Show. I'm your host Fahad Matin for this evening, and we are talking about awareness of Rett Syndrome with a very, very nice guest, and he's the guy who's literally explaining me about every single thing about this particular syndrome, and he's none other than Robert Adamek. This program is broadcasting live from the studios of Inspire FM on 10th of October 2019, and casting its positive vibes to our lovely people in Luton and all the surrounding areas of Luton. Listening all the way across Dunstable, Harpenden, Bedford, to going on the south side, or going on the east side and west side. And definitely, if you are listening us through Inspire FM webpage or web app, or even through our Facebook page live link, if you're viewing us, good evening and welcome back. So before we went on break, we were talking about this Rett syndrome in very detail, and I must say Robert was very, very nice, very kind enough to give us some basic details and some in-depth knowledge of this particular syndrome. And just to recapture from my brain, so at least it settled in my brain before I go to my guest, that Rett syndrome is a very rare genetic mutation syndrome, which happens mostly happens in girls, but boys do get affected, and it is something which is genetically based, and it's not necessarily need to happen to every single one. So it's like it's like one hit and miss kind of thing, and you need to have certain genetic markers to have this. And even then, it's not necessary that every single child have. It has a wide spectrum, like any other syndromes, that people from different spectrums shows different sections, and definitely it is developed. It has been diagnosed, but it's not easy to diagnose, and sometimes people do get misdiagnosed. So let me introduce and let me welcome our guest back into the show and ask him if I'm right. So Rob, firstly, repronounce your surname, because I definitely...
No, it's Adamek.
Adamek. Yes, I think so. I've pronounced your name wrong.
I don't make it easy. It's a Polish surname. So.
You do not have a Polish accent, but...
I don't. I think, what am I? Second generation.
Okay.
I have to think about that for a second and just get slapped from my grandma. Don't worry.
Right. Okay. In terms of Rett syndromes, the things which I've just repeat, how far I am from the original lines?
Yeah, you're bang on.
Yeah,
but you're bang on.
And I must say,
exactly it.
I spoke to you on Monday, right?
You did, yeah.
So up till Monday, this Monday past, I did not know about this syndrome. In fact, I just spoke to a couple of my GP friends, and they were literally looking at me like I'm talking something different. So I must say this is a very unique and very not very publicized or very well-known syndrome.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I think you probably come across quite a few of these, unless a celebrity child or somebody famous has got a child with this illness, it probably won't ever come to prominence because it will skip on by. There's hundreds and hundreds. We're part of a rare disease network across the UK, and I mean, like I said before, ours is the second most common cause of severe disability. Can you imagine some of the other ones that are even further down the list? And the importance of that is a lot of those sometimes are mistaken. So we've had people diagnosed with Rett syndrome, and it ends up being something like Angelman syndrome, which I won't throw into the bag. I'm not doing their piece. Theirs is just as complicated in its own way. So to do them justice, maybe one day you'll find someone from there. But
that's a mutation disease as well.
Once again, yeah, and that's even rarer.
So,
and
sorry to be on a very awkwardly asking you. So some people think being a mutant, you will end up flying, and you are.
And it's got a terrible. Unfortunately, there's some terrible connotations between the words. Some of the serious words. So we have everything from retardation to mutation. What people are to always remember, those are scientific terms. I mean, the general consensus is you don't go around using the word retardation, but that is a clinical term. That's when whenever it's used, obviously by me, it's then done in a clinical sense. So it's with all of these things, sometimes the language becomes difficult and can put people off. That's why I will try to make it clear to people that it doesn't matter where you are, what countries, what traditions. We've got a lovely young girl in the office, and she was asking, does it make any difference who the family are, what their bloodline is? If they're, for instance, close. Are they close family? Could they be if it's first cousin, second cousin? And it doesn't affect the syndrome at all. It's unfortunately, it has no bias. It affects everyone. English, Asian, Chinese, Jamaican, it affects us all. Luckily in the UK, obviously, we've got people like us, but our third biggest amount of traffic to our website is from India, where there's even less information, and everything is on the internet then. So it's a wild west, depending on where you land. You land on our pages, so we've done lots and lots of research. We've taken as much advice as we can and put facts out there, but same with everything, it can be a bit of a wild west out there when you're trying to find out actual facts and actual information.
Indeed. Okay, let's go back to our topic and ask you, when you told me about the diagnosis, the misdiagnosis, but then at the same time, what is the age these diagnoses happen?
So to be fair, we're looking at about after a year to 18 months of what we would call typical normal development. So everything I explained, they're called a toddler for a reason. They start toddling around, they start to try and walk. Most children end up able to walk at probably about the 18-month stage. They start to do things that you either have seen in your own children or other children, other siblings. Then you start to realise those things are starting to get affected. So they might lose skills, anything from the ability to walk, talk, or feed themselves. We say the kind of telltale signs, even before regression, are kind of odd, kind of stereotypical hand movements. So I was talking about hand wringing. It's sometimes called hand washing, tapping, mouthing. And another big flag for us is any kind of the deceleration in postnatal head growth. So in English, that's the skull not developing at the same speed as the rest of the body, which is normally a big flag to the start or the onset of something like Rett syndrome. And from there, so we have, you were asking, well, I'll read the actual definitions and be honest with you, it's 4 main criteria. So if you're listening to this, essentially, and I'll read these 4 out, and you're thinking, oh, goodness, this, I think, my son or daughter might be similar, then this is what we would say. You would then go to the hospital or the doctor. So first of all, it's partial or complete loss of acquired purposeful hand skill. So English translation is either regressing, so not being able to grip a spoon if they were able to feed themselves, or not being able to grip a crayon, or starting to literally lose the ability to hold a water bottle in their hands, or anything like that, or the milk bottle. After a while, kids like to do everything themselves, don't they? So it's losing that. So you'll have seen it happen. They start to learn it, and they unacquire it, basically. That's the first one. Partial or complete loss of acquired spoken language. So regardless of which child, they start to make sounds, and those sounds start to try and form words, and those words then try and form sentences. You'll see it regress. So if it was sentences, it then possibly goes back to words, then to grunts or sounds, then possibly the inability to even make those noises.
So when the birth happens, when the child is there, they can make those sounds, and then the regression happens.
So go back to this clinic in Manchester. I was with a family, and it was only 2 months before that they started noticing this in their daughter, and she was nearly 2 years old. And their daughter was the same. So they had next door neighbours, and they were developing the same. They were best friends. Then they started to see a gap. The next door neighbour's daughter's starting to try and balance on a tricycle, and their daughter's struggling to pull herself up off the sofa, whereas before she was jumping around on the sofa. And that was one of the triggers, and then they started to realise there was more and more. And in their case, they actually got a diagnosis extremely quickly. One of the other families who have a daughter that's in her late 40s, it took them 30 years to get an actual diagnosis, because the mother and father were so old that the daughter was in care and in a home, and the parents were in a home. So they had the beginning of a retirement home or a retirement village, not a care home, but and because the diagnosis, the original diagnosis, what this girl was given a long time ago, no one went back and checked. So essentially, she was being treated with severe autism in this case. So yeah, there's and I go back to the other things. So we've got something called gait abnormalities. That's your gait, is your step, your stride. So you start to see strange things happen with that. And go back to the stereotypical hand movement. So in most of our girls, they end up grabbing or grasping at their hands, and you start to see that, and it's not something they can control. So if you separate the hands, like we all develop some kind of habit forming behaviors, some of them more visual than others, but in this case it's so difficult, because it's go back to just staying science. The scientists believe, or people believe, that it's something that's triggered as part of that mutation in the brain to do that kind of behaviour, because it's across the spectrum, regardless of which girl. It tends to affect them with that. And those are the 4 things that you would really look out for. But as you start to see those, once again, we go back to, some people it may be slower. As a parent, you may be slower to admit, or I don't want anyone to think, oh, my son or daughter have not been able to pull themselves up today, they've not. This is a continuous behaviour. You would see it across all aspects. It wouldn't be just today it's happened, tomorrow. It would gradual. And
so it is a birth defect which happens at the time of when it happens.
Yeah, about 18 months.
But it did not come in light till the child was moved on. Sometimes the child it didn't come out for 5 years. Sometimes it come out.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the most destructive thing. You have
a healthy born child which then degrade.
Yes, to in some cases severe disabilities. Crying, they're not able to walk. Most of the families have to have winches and cranes fitted inside their homes to move their children about. They have special vehicles. It affects everybody's life, because then you have to worry about carers if you want to work, or it's
Okay, in terms of the people, when I say that it is. It's a very unique thing which not many people have heard about, and then you mentioned that because like anything else. So as this is the second largest syndrome of people being disabled
in girls, yes,
in girls, after
Down syndrome.
Down syndromes. So I remember when somebody's pregnant, they normally do a test to check whether the baby is normal or abnormal. So can those tests also?
So absolutely, there is one for Down syndrome, and then there's when the baby's born, there's also something called a heel prick test, isn't there? And that scans some stuff. That's it's kind of a difficult and contentious issue. Because of the way it would be found, there isn't. Yes, at some point that might be possible. I'll try and stay as on the fence as possible. Yes, that possibly is possible. And then you would essentially make the decisions from there.
Currently,
it's not part of what the NHS deem as something that they would do.
Okay. In terms of as any syndrome lies, whenever there are two things: either they are disease or they are syndromes. So syndromes normally last for life.
Yes.
And when you class something as syndrome, that means it is there for life, and all you have to do is manage that syndrome.
Yep.
But I heard you mention that there is a cure you guys are working on developing a cure.
It's not right. So yeah, absolutely. So if I explain this, because absolutely, what I said about people researching on the internet, the other thing, if I was a father and put myself in that position, so my 1.5-year-old daughter starts to regress, and I go in and I get the diagnosis from my clinician, and he says she's got Rett syndrome. So I go online and I start to read this. And what I read is that there was a scientist who reversed Rett syndrome in mice quite a while ago. And then I would jump on that hope that I would be able to get a cure. Now, the first thing that I would just say is how a cure manifests itself is very, very different. So when we're talking about a cure, and then I leave this as an open question, what would someone deem as a cure? What would it be? Would it be, so we go back to your question, was if it's diagnosed in the womb and that your child has possibly or has Rett syndrome, what do you do then? So we have to take technology that's currently cutting edge, which is something like gene splicing or gene editing. It's also some places very controversial. And you could apply possibly something like that maybe, and then before the child's born. So I don't want to go into too many theoretical things, but I mentioned for instance, the skull growth. So say, for instance, you reverse that in a 4 or 6 or an 8-year-old girl, and then her brain continues to develop and her body continues to develop perfectly, but say the skull doesn't, because you don't know what the effects are. So you cured someone of the syndrome, but perhaps you haven't cured them of the ability to then increase their skull. So you've got a brain growing inside the skull. All of these things come with their own problem. But we go back to the main thing. There isn't a cure for humans at all at the moment. And the gentleman that did discover it says that it's probably not going to happen in his lifetime. So these are his words. So whilst we absolutely have hope, it'd be crazy of me not to want something like that. It's the main thing I want. I'd essentially love to not have a job one day, just be really shut up shop. But you can imagine if there was a cure for the girls right now, we have people and families living 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s, will possibly be pushing 80, 90-year-olds at some point. Those people still need to live and have support, and that's what our organisation does. So we do work very closely with somebody called Reverse Rett, and they're the British arm of an American organisation also called Reverse Rett, and they are massively for the research. So you can imagine in the cancer sector, you've got cancer research, and then you've got Macmillan who do the support. We're essentially the support organisation. We're out, I'm on your radio show, trying to get the knowledge out there of this syndrome, this condition, to get those people, because what we care about is those perhaps 5 or 6 people in Luton or anywhere, any of your listeners. There may be a grandma or an auntie that's heard what I've said or reads one of our leaflets and says, do you know what? My daughter, or mention something, just at the mosque, mention something and says, oh, I heard something the other day, not sure, but your daughter, it seems some of these symptoms, some of the things he said, she is a bit floppy. And do you remember after 2 years old, she started to, it's those things. And then she gets the diagnosis, then she engages with us. And then when the darkest times are, she's got somebody on the phone, or they've got somebody on the phone, and there's possibly be people living. Well, there is. We know that there's people living with this condition that have got no support or help.
In terms of a child who was born normally and then when they deformed, so they cannot walk. So what are they?
They end up. Most of our girls end up with severe difficulty walking. I mentioned a lady we work with. Her daughter's currently is still able to walk.
And the body parts, do they develop as well, or do they stay?
They will develop, but as much as somebody in a wheelchair can develop without exercise. For instance, you'll have seen, without exercise, your body starts to waste away, so your bones get weaker, etc. So with that is all of those things. One thing, though, we'll keep going back to is these girls inside, they are just the same as you and I. They have just the same thoughts, urges, feelings, but they can't act or say any of those. They can't go on a date. They can't say I love you. They can't say I don't like this TV program, or I really don't like mushrooms in my food, or don't put peas in my rice. Just simple things that we all take for granted. So it's the magic of some of our communication tools and some of the things that we do across the UK. We do the breakfasts and mornings and all kinds of things. We work with the parents to teach them some standard what's called AAC communication tools, and we always tell the parents to do what's now known as presumed competence. Always assume that there's full competence there. What's the worst case scenario? Is that you do all of this work to find that your son or daughter can't speak. But when they can, which most of them can, it's something amazing, especially when you see that first ever conversation. There's not much that brings a tear to my eye these days with the news how it is, but something like that is just fantastic.
Okay. In terms of the resources and the families you help, so what sort of help you're providing different families to, and what sort of a response you see from them, and what sort of resources you provide to other organizations?
So essentially I was saying our sole aim is to provide support to the people suffering from Rett syndrome. But as a periphery, as a side effect, you can imagine I have to go out there and talk about Rett syndrome, because it would be unfair on the parents to fight that struggle themselves too. Or I say parents, carers, clinicians that are involved. We fight on their behalf to get people to know, because the more people know, I'm not saying we want everyone to be an expert, but if you're aware, then you can then recommend the things that needed to be recommended. For instance, nearly all of our girls can benefit from sleep monitoring. Most of our girls suffer from some kind of sleep issue, whether it's not breathing while they're sleeping, whether it's taking short, shallow breaths, which then means that they're not getting enough CO2 in. All of those things, they're all very specific things that need very specific treatments. So yes, our general knowledge combines into not what we call, I wouldn't say we're expert knowledge, but we're heading towards that. And then all of our research, we then feed back to our clinicians. So we've got clinics in Manchester, clinics in Northern Ireland, clinics in Scotland. And all of those guys, we encourage to talk to each other. Sorry, guys, the doctors, geneticists. I don't want to disrespect them. My guys is my generic term. But yeah, it's all of those people, and then they all feed back. So we're part of the European Congress. We're actually holding, us and the other organisation. We call ourselves the Rett Disorders Alliance. We're holding the European Congress in 2021. So it's our responsibility for the whole of Europe to represent everyone, host everybody here, and have the top scientists and etc. around the world. So yeah, we try our best to keep.
Okay, as we are closely approaching towards the end of the show, I just have literally 1.5 minutes. So if I ask you to quickly summarize within the 1.5 minute about Rett syndrome, what will you say?
Yep. It's a rare genetic syndrome. It affects mainly girls. We mentioned already it's the second biggest cause of severe disability amongst females. And an organisation like ours can make a massive difference to these people. We very recently helped a lady come out of a coma. Because from the very advice I said that we give, they managed to do something, and she woke up from a coma. I mean, it's a bit of a headline, but I think it can give you some of the massive impact that we have.
Thank you so much for helping. And if I ask you to give a quick response for any of the parents who have loved you work with their kids. Yeah,
absolutely. So we're inundated with fantastic feedback. Like I said, the communication things are magic. That's some of the letters that we've got in are brilliant.
But all these things are available on your website.
Absolutely, yes. So Perfect. It's Rett, which is RETT.org.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being part of the show and spreading this knowledge. I really loved it. And thank you so much for being part of our show. And that's all for today's show, my friends. We will meet again next week, and it will be Sulaiman Rafiq, my co-host. My other half on this radio show will be here doing a show on postnatal care, and he will be sharing some expert advice. Till next week, I'm your host Fahad Matin, saying Assalamu Alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at InspireFM Luton.